So you have any idea about stream? Like what does the stream term mean by the in general?
So stream real-time data processing, right?
Yeah, real-time data which we're going to process. Okay, so there are multiple ways you can get your data, right? So right now it can be in a normal text file, or it can be normal text box, or it can be through any file, any format of LCSV or Excel or any PowerPoint or any kind of data. So basically the input can be in any source and output has to be in a different source. So how are we going to handle this IO related operations in Java through streams? So the stream is nothing but whatever source you get your data from. It can be in any format of data, from any source. So we're going to read the data and then transform that data and then send back to the relevant destination. So this entire IO processing will take care of like where your file is, where you're going to send it, how you're going to read it, how you're going to write it. So entire process will be handling in this IO handling. So where you will be working majorly on streams. So since Java or any kind of architecture, like the base architecture can understand only the zeros and ones internally, the system can understand only zeros and ones. So when you give a 10,000 records file of data set from a CSV or Excel, it can't transform the entire data set immediately. So internally what happens is whatever text your data might be, we will be converting that into a bytes. And then we later transform them into the data format which we need. So this looks like data to bytes, and from that bytes to data. So only in this way the system can understand, and the reading or writing activity can be more faster. If your data is in like a string format, or it is in a Japanese or in a Spanish language, it is not that easy to convert or do some processing on top of your data set. So to do that kind of transformation, we have something called streams in Java. That is IO handling, input and output handling. And how can we use this, and what are the different type of streams we have in Java system? That we'll be exploring today. So there's also one thing. Whenever we transform this data, say my source, say example, I'm in India and someone is giving me a file from India, and I need to transform and send that file back to USA. So if I need to do this transformation, my server, which is in India, is not having any kind of security, and there's no secure information. But in USA, the data is so secure. So I say like they have imposed some kind of security in the USA servers. So whenever I do some kind of transformation, the data set is going to be same. But since there is no security here, what happens, sometimes the data can have a privilege to leak, or some hackers can hack it, or this kind of server will not encrypt your data in a more secure format since there's no security here, and you are dependent on your server, then the data is not so efficient, like not properly efficiently secured way. So you have to write your own logic to make it secure, right? So to avoid these kind of stuff, there's something called serialization and deserialization. So what this deserialization and serialization is basically like it converts your objects into the format of the server understands in a more secure way, and deserializes the same content which is in more of encoded format data, and gives you the actual data set which you shared from the India location. So this kind of serialization and deserialization can be achieved. So where, for example, if you're giving a CSV file, and when you encoded the CSV file will be in some other format and no one can read it. But after doing a deserialization, you might read it. So for example, if my Excel has first column as ID, second column as name, third column as my age, and fourth column as my work location. So I have like 5 attributes, let's say. So all these 5 attributes is similar to my object structure. I call Pojo model class. I can create myself, and I can wrap it up in object-oriented programming, and then transform this data, serialize this data. So what happens, the entire serialized data would be in an object format, which is not readable. And after deserialization, I'd be able to fetch the relevant data information again from the object format after doing the deserialization. So how can I do it? So in terms of object-oriented programming and without object-oriented programming, how the serialization can help us in handling your input and output, different type of inputs and different type of outputs. So that will be observing that today. So how we are going to read? So the basic operation to perform any IO is like either you read a file or you write onto a file. These are the basic things. And then the editing, updating is all like, it all falls again into the same category. The basic is either you read or write. So these two operations, how can we perform? And what are the different possibilities? Like through collections, how we had the set, map, and list. Same way through this file streaming, what are the different ways to read and to write, and what are the different interfaces or classes we have? And here again, you can observe this abstract class concept, interface concept, and inheritance concept. More predominantly these three concepts, because these three are tightly coupled in case of your IO handling. So that we'll observe today. So let me so let me say. So all your IO related operations and all those files will come in the Java IO package. So far you have learned lang package, java.util package for all your collections. But right now you'll be learning more into the IO package, where all input and output related things will be taken care of, like conversion from string to data or bytes to data, whatever format you have finally, that can be done in both reverse and in vice versa. So for doing that, so all the package and all the classes interfaces are available under IO package. So now if you observe, so this is the input stream, the main package, and then you have something called output stream. Okay. So these are the main files which we basically depend on, and based on this abstract class, and all the classes are built on top of it. So if you see on the input stream, this is a purpose where we go and do the read data, like where we read it. Whenever you get a file, you read that file. And whenever you wanted to share your file, you have to write the file and then you have to send it. Either you write or you recopy or resend the same file. The writing purpose happens on giving us an output, and the reading purpose happens as an input. Sometimes we might write our own file and then share them to others. That also happens, vice versa. But more preferably, we say the input streams as our readers and the output streams as our writers. So if you see this is again a overloaded method, read method. If you see, this is an abstract method. So wherever you want, you override the logic of this read method based on the types of streams. So there are multiple streams available. We'll see one by one. And but before that, this would be the major class structure which we need to look on. And if you see, this is just a normal read method, and whatever you read is always written in the format of integer. So the bytes part, whatever you have, it will always convert it. And if you want the input as string, you have to use a relevant stream class. If you want your data in bytes, you have to use a relevant byte class. So there are multiple input stream classes and output stream classes, and we will use them as per our requirement. But we'll see what are the different types of streams we have. Why do we need to prefer to go for that, and what is the need? We'll see one by one. So the first thing is read method, which is like by default, anyone can use it anytime. But if you see, there's something called read of byte. So what is this byte? So what is the size of the byte, you remember?
So 8 bits, right? 1 byte.
Yeah. So let's say I have byte array, bytes equal to Let me try one minute. So let me first explain the methods and then we'll do this use case. So if you see, this is again one which accepts your byte data and which is byte array, and then it reads. And if you just observe this method, we always validate the data. So if your data is empty, we always throw null pointer exception. And if your data is like not valid data, and if you're, since it's an array, then you might go and end up with index out of 1. And otherwise, if you see, we are every time reading each byte of whatever data set. If you are sharing CSV file or if you're sharing Excel file, whatever it might be, it will internally convert your data into bytes. So array of bytes, and all those bytes will be taken care of. And every time we read that data. So this logic works over there based on the position of your byte values, because your byte ranges from -128 to +120. So the range depends on that. And we read all data together. What if my data set is more high? Like if I have like 1 million data of records. So in that case, handling through this particular read method and write method would be little slow performing. And that is the reason we have more third-party libraries available right now, where they have tweaked the algorithm little better to read a huge set of data sets. So for that purpose, we will be using the relevant libraries to have a more performative, to improve that performativity. Other than that, this input stream and outstream stream should be more than enough for us to read for nearly for 1 lakh or 2 lakhs, even for more than that. But only thing is, if you increase your data set, your performance might be little less. So we prefer to use third-party libraries since they have implemented in a better algorithmic way. So that is first point. So if you go for output stream, you can again observe that there is a method called as write. It's again an overloaded method. So in this overloaded method, we again accept the array of bytes and we write the data, the same thing. And again in your write, you go and handle it. So this is again like how you do it, where we write your data. So every time when you give cat, the entire cat character will be converted to the byte, and post that we will be taking the relevant bytes, convert them, and then we transform those particular bytes into the destination location. So this is how we do it. So how this hierarchy works. So if you see this input stream and output stream, these are classified into multiple layers. So the first one, if you see, it's a byte array output stream and byte array input stream. And if you want to read some files, it can be text file or it can be any format of files, then we have the relevant file output streams and file input streams. And there is something called filter output stream and object output stream, which is for your object oriented. And for piped output stream is again something for your data sets to travel, like whenever it's coming from mainframe systems or any legacy systems. In that case, we prefer some piped out streams also. And there are again, if you see, there again something called a string buffer input stream. So if you have a data set, like, just a moment. Sorry. So whenever we get this type of streams, these all are dealing with only with your bytes. So there's nothing like string data set. So we get every time get the bytes, and with that bytes we handle it. And if you see, if you observe again, there's some kind of streams here. So buffer output stream, data output stream, and print stream. So what these three types of streams are? What is this buffer data? So we'll see one by one now. So let's first create a normal file to use this input stream concept, and then we'll use the same output stream to write and then share the data. So let's try one sample set. So let's first try with the byte array. So this byte array input stream is again a class. So whenever we are trying to read a file, we need to have some data. So I'm just going to use this bytes here. So let me give.
So the data input should be real time, right?
Yeah, yes, Kurva. So right now we are just trying with all the streams, but most probably we'll be using in real time the streams which we prefer to go right. Mostly would be like kind of buffer reader and buffer writer, and there's something called as file reader and file writer, and then you also have one more thing called string related thing, string reader and string writer. So we prefer these kind of streams to handle any kind of file operations, but these are kind of to understand what is the purpose, because internally everything, whatever stream you use, internally they all get converted them into byte format. So we'll see how this works and what are the advantages of why we are preferring the buffer reader and not byte array input stream. And in few cases, we also prefer byte array, but for huge data set, we avoid this byte array because all your data has to be in byte array. You never know whether your source would be always byte. It can be an Excel file or it can be a CSV file. So you can't go and convert every time these bytes and pass it here. So we use these buffered input streams and file writers and readers. If your text is a string file and you want to pass it from, if you want to read it from any kind of database activity, then we go for string readers and writers. Or else if you're having a file as your input, or then in that case you have to identify the file type, get the data from the file type. In that case, everything will be handled with the help of buffer readers and output streams. So now if you see, let me say this is my array. So let me read that. So you have these two methods, read. So I'll go with this read. So what this read method gives is it will actually throw you an exception, IO exception. If you see this read method, this particular read method can throw you a, this read method can throw IO exception if your data is not sufficient. So it's always better to have the exception handled in try catch a block, or also it's better to throw here throws IO exception.
So one doubt, if you go to the read method, what is synchronized in?
Yeah, so this is a keyword which you'll learn in threads concept. So whenever like two or more threads are going to come and read the data, then we'll use this synchronized keyword. So this is synchronized keyword is like a kind of a keyword which helps you to avoid the deadlock situation. So only when one particular thread completes this process, the other thread can come in. So two threads will not do it together. So so far we haven't taken about the string buffer. We haven't covered the vector class, which is similar to your array list. We haven't covered the tree map. We haven't covered the concurrent hash map use cases. So all these four things, whatever I left out so far, will be covered in the thread concept when we start learning the multi-threaded environment. So there you'll be learning more about the synchronized keyword, deadlock situations, how to wait for the other thread to come and start the process of your other thread. It's more of like give and take. I'll wait till you complete and post that I'll start my task. So how this communication happens between the producers and the consumers of the entire workflow, you'll be knowing it once we start threads.
Okay.
Yeah. So the synchronized keyword is basically to avoid the deadlock, and that works on a multi-threaded environment. I can give that information as of now, but in detail, you'll see once you start exploring threads concept. So now, every time, whenever you give this while condition, you have to provide a condition, right? Just read method will not be sufficient. So what is the condition if you have here, if you observe, if the value is less than count, you're going ahead, otherwise you're returning -1. So what I'm going to do is, anyway, this read method will return me what? Int. So I'm going to have a int declared here, int I equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is, every time an operation is happening, I'm going to check whether the I value, which I'm getting the entire count value, I'm going to say whether this is I is equal to this and it is not equal to my -1, because in the -1 we're just, it's basically like end termination. That is the reason we're returning it as -1. So to know that okay, we have reached the end of the file reading part, to make ourselves aware of that, I'm going to do a validation check in this condition, like only if it is not equal to -1, I'm going to go into the loop. Otherwise I'm not going to the loop and read the file data. So I'm gonna So this is my condition. So I'm using this particular input stream object to read the data, and I'm checking based on the condition given. It's -1 is for end of file. So I'm checking only if it is not equal to file, go into that and then read the data set, and whatever data set you have, just print me it. Since it's returning me the integer, I'm going to print the relevant integer. So the I is the position, and I convert that position into a character and see what is that for my data set. Because integer, I'm just knowing to see what is the char set of it.
So what would be the content in byte array input stream? Because I don't think we are passing anything to it.
Yeah, I am yet to pass. I didn't do that. If you see there's an error here, right? I'm yet to pass it. So this is an empty object. So far, I didn't add anything. If you see in the byte array input stream, it accepts a byte array, right? I haven't passed it. So that was the reason it was throwing it. It's not a default constructor. So you have to tell that byte I have some input, and from that input, give me the actual result set. So I'm giving this bytes as my input here. So now let's execute it. So whatever bytes you get, you will validate it, and the respective since the byte is less than that, I have given very minimal value, I'm getting it. Let me give some value which we know. 98 is something which we know. 100. Let me do this. Yeah. Let me execute it. So if you see, the 10th character is some other special character, 20 character special, 98 is alphanumeric or the alphabet character, and then you have the 100 character as D. So all the relevant characters are getting read every time after doing this read condition. So what if my byte array is empty? So if you see that we don't have this particular statement coming in because you don't have any data in your byte. So you're not going into this particular while condition itself. You're not able to read it because it is not equal to -1. If I have avoided this condition, you still see it's getting printed because my I position is 0 because it's coming for the first time. But there is no character here because there is no data in my bytes, so empty. That there is no null pointer exception, nothing, because it's an empty object, empty byte array. So there's no error here. But if sometimes if you're having the byte array with more size and if you're having huge data set, in that case you might throw up with an exception. But right now to our scenario, we don't have data, so we don't have any exceptions created. It's always better to restrict that so that we won't read an empty file. We'll read only if the file has data, so that we can avoid this particular piece of code execution by giving the conditions, like how do you handle your null checks without throwing null pointer exception. Same way, this would also help us in not throwing the other exceptions which might come, like index out of bound. So those exceptions can be avoided if we do these checks. So far, any query on this part? So basically this byte array input stream is nothing but you're going to read your data, but in the format of byte arrays. That is the only thing. So whenever you have your data as your byte array, you can prefer to go with this. And it's basically reads your data and gives it, but it is like, it's not like a huge set of data. It's like every time you have to give your data in bytes and then convert it. So in real time, where do we prefer to go with byte array input stream? So if you see any payment gateway systems, where you'll be having the CCC number or a 4-digit PIN, or you'll have your entire card number, and all these details will never be shared to a third-party system, because we have this interface. For example, you have your e-commerce application and you're going to access a payment gateway, and from that payment gateway you need to complete your transaction and come back. So the information from your e-commerce web application to the payment gateway, whatever details are getting transacted, will not be very like direct information, like S for this, B for this. It's not like direct information. So what we do in that case is, this entire bytes, whatever we get as an input from the user, we get it in the form of bytes. We apply our own security logic, either MD5 or SHA-256, any kind of security algorithms we impose on that. And on top of that, we get again a new byte set. And that bytes will be sent to the payment gateway system, and they decode it, do the transaction, and then once the entire flow is completed, they return back and acknowledge again in the byte format. So all the legacy systems like Citibank, where else, like Wells Fargo, all these companies, initially when they started developing on the payment gateway system, they were using this process of using bytes to convert the data set in a more efficient way. So even now in the payment gateway systems, your data will not be in the string format or text format, not in a readable format. It will always be in bytes. So we have the relevant formatters imposed. So every time we have to break this entire byte set, and in this particular position, okay, these 4 bytes will help us to give us the CCV. These 4 bytes will help us to give you the card PIN number or the valid last 4 digits of card number. So we have this position making from the bytes, and we formatted data. So this kind of tedious way of handling your data set comes in the middleware development, where you write all your secure logics, all your byte related handling. So this entire, whatever you see right now in Java IO, the rt.jar, similar way we build our own jar to handle the data sets between multiple systems as a connector. So this would be the connectors. So if right now it is just a structure for you, but you can enhance this structure by imposing MD5, SHA-256, or even X509 certificates, whatever security systems you want to add, you can use that and convert it so that your entire system would be more secure. So that is the reason many of the places we still use this byte array. But in real time, like if you see like normal applications wherever we develop, there we go with the buffer input and output rather than the byte input. So based on the use cases, we prefer which stream to take care. So now let's see how to write the file. So we were just reading from the bytes what we had. So to write a file, which class do I need to look for? Similar for byte array input stream.
Write byte array output stream.
Yes. So we have the symmetrical, like for write, we have the same class, and for read, we also have the same. Only thing, the naming structure gets changed and the method gets changed. So if you see right now, this is allowing me without passing any data, because you are going to write your own bytes. You're not going to read that. So if you see, this byte output stream is just a default one. And within this, if you see, there's something called this. So what this is, right? Whenever you're trying to write, you need to know what your data size is, right? For that purpose, whenever you're creating it, it will be defaulted with some value. And if you're sure that you're going to increase that size later point of time, then you can add your own value of size. How do you do for your array list, right? To or in the map, how to improve your capacity. The same way, we can give our own size and increase the byte array stream, and then add your data in your byte values. So if you see what happens whenever you create your byte array output stream is, internally it checks your size. If its size is empty, then it will be defaulted. If not, every time your byte will be created with that size value. So internally, the reverse process is happening. So far you created here the byte array directly. So you didn't get any kind of size kind of details you were not required of. But right now you're going to write it. So you need the data size, and you use this buffer to create your own byte array, and you add your data into this buffer, and then you send them back. So now let's see how to add your data. So if you see, there are multiple methods in the byte array output stream. So you have close. I'll tell the close little later. But if you see here, you have this write methods. These are the basic things which we're going to use. And after that, there's something called reset. And then you can also grow your memory size of your byte array. For that purposes, we have the relevant methods. Okay. So now, whenever you write these kind of data, there might be a case like you have defined a size, say 50, but whenever you're trying to add your data in real-time applications, you might exceed the data size. So in that case, it might end up with a failure. Your data is not sufficient to add into that byte array, because you have defined a size of 50, but you're exceeding that size. So in that cases, you might expect a runtime exceptions. So sorry. So in that case, we might end up with the runtime exceptions. So to avoid those runtime exceptions, it's always we have to make sure on the size. Whenever we are writing the size, it's always like we have to be very clear. The size should be dynamic or it has to be static, because these things, this is a static piece of code which will not be changed either later too. But only thing is, the capacity of your writing part might change. Initially, you had 2 lines of code, 2 lines of statements to print, and later you had 100 lines of statement to print. In that case, the size gets varied. So either you have to make your size configurable, like so that in future, if you're increasing the capacity, that has to be like it has to resize by itself. You can sorry, what was I saying about size only, right?
When we write, you were saying that initially you can be printing 2 lines. Sometimes the need can rise up to 1,000 lines.
Yeah. So like whenever we want to increase the capacity, like because this piece of code is something static. So if your package is going for later deployments, you don't do any changes. Whoever shares any kind of file, we read and we just print it. That's it. There's no change happening here. But in case of writing, your size is very much important. So if your size is getting changed, because if it is like the use case is like every time a file is going to be created after a batch job is done, where I'm going to send the data with only 5 lines of data. So it has only like when the file was created and what was the data size, how many records success and how many records were failed, still processing records count. Just this is the information I have in the file if I'm doing a batch processing, and I'm going to send a report every time. So in that case, what happens? I know only this amount of lines I'm going to print. It's a static. So in that case, I can predefine my size value so that there won't be any issues. Say, for example, you have a text editor in your screen in a web browser. You have a text editor. Anyone who writes into the text editor, we have to immediately make them to download the text file. We are not going to store the data for that user. It's like online. You go type whatever you want, edit it, and get it printed immediately. Otherwise, the content will be destroyed. So few people come into online and just they type like 100 lines and they get it printed, edit it, and go. Few come and they type 1,000 lines and go. So every time the size is getting changed, the content of that is getting changed every time. So for that purpose, we need to make sure the size is always configurable. So what is configurable? So we don't need to define the size in the code. We make it that defined outside the code. So how can we define the size outside the code? To do that, we have something called properties.class in Java, which is available in the system package. So this is the properties. So properties is nothing but you have something like this. I can show you. So for example, if I have something like this, okay, this would be the key and this would be the value. So this would be the key and this would be the value. So this is like again your hash map, key and value pair. And all this can be added over here. So this particular property class is again extending your hash table, which is the legacy class of your hash map. And this particular hash map helps us to store all your data set in it. So how this data set will be stored here is, you can either fetch one property from your file. So right now, if I have port as my data, I can say get property of port and I get the relevant value. So if I want to get the entire file details, I can say load. So whenever I wanted to run my application, I load all the properties, pre-required properties, everything I load from it, get it used, and then I'll again store the data in the relevant file. Like if I wanted to store it in a server in this particular path, I'll go and store in that particular path. So I can use that way, or I can read from a particular path in a server and also use that data set. So there are multiple ways for us to read a property and write a property or update a property. Everything can be done if you have access to that path, the file path where you wanted to read or write anything. So for that purpose, we have this properties class. So in this way, we can go and say, we can go and define that, okay, I don't want this size to be defined as 20 or 30 within the code. I'll go and write size and I'll give a value here as right now 300. Maybe in future, if it's going to be changed or if it's going to be upgraded, I'll just make it like, okay, 3000 this time. So I'll update only this property here so that whenever my write purpose is increasing or it is decreasing, I can just update the byte array size here, and so that the memory impact will be very less and I can avoid the runtime exceptions. So that is the reason we always prefer to have our properties here. So how to read the properties, that we'll see again. But there is a, right now you need to know, like there is a way that we can have our properties defined in any kind of file called as dot properties, and you can have it defined with key equal to value. And you can store it in any way. So we'll see how to do that little later. But right now the use case is like, if you want to resize your values, you can make it configurable. So that is the first point. So now the second thing, reset. So whenever, yeah.
So this properties file you are talking about is like, I've seen some files, job.properties. So will we see it when we start looking at Maven, or how is it?
So, so these property files will always be stored in some path. Okay, if it's in a server, they'll be stored in some path, and all those paths will be loaded on launch of your application. So right now we haven't written any properties yet. But if you have it in real time, any bad job happening or any kind of runtime ad hoc activities, in that case, what we do is we load those properties on bootload of like bootstrap of the application and not after the application starts. Why so? Because if your size is like predefined with 300, there is no problem. There is no change in your size. Suppose if you have changed your size value to 5,000 and you have, and your program has to accept that 5,000 on start of your application reading, then you have to either restart your entire Java application, or you have to go and you can't do it in between of the process, right? So you have to tell it every time before starting it, please load those properties or consider those properties. So that would be always in the bootstrapping of the purpose. Before your application launches or before your program compiles, then your property has to be defined with that value. Because once the properties are read, they won't be changed unless you restart your application or restart your Java program. Okay, so did I answer your question or did I miss it anything again?
Yeah, fine. For now, it's fine.
Okay, so your question was like where the properties and when did it get loaded, right?
I think I've come across this properties file, but I think it was during when I was learning about Maven, so I was not sure.
Okay, yeah. So usually like all these server related activities, right? Like if it's a small activity or small Java application or any script related activity, you maintain everything in a properties file. So even the, like if you see like in banking applications, there might be scenarios where like entire transactions may not be complete, or even in the stock or trade, entire data will not be complete before the time. Something will be pending or something gets delayed. So in that case, what they do is they connect to the relevant database servers and process that activity backend without impacting the business as usual. So in that case, they need the DB related details to connect and do all the activities in the backend, right? Because sometimes there might be audit going on, you have to not log in the production service directly. You can do only by bypassing, or only very few users will have the privilege to do that. So in those cases, what they do is all these related informations will be given in the properties, and they initiate the task later only when they get the control from the higher authorities or the upper managements to initiate the process. And in that time, they start the application only then. They get the data, load the data, push everything out of the queue or whatever, if it is a queue or if it is like a DB, they clear it out and then they come out of it. So whenever they come out of it, your properties has to be closed. You should not have the privilege to read your property again. Only if you have the relevant access or privilege to connect to that properties path, you will be able to launch that application. So there might be multiple Java programs running, which will run only if you execute a command with this particular ch mode with full access and relevant username and password is given. That particular Java application will run and all the properties will be read. Otherwise, it will not be read and it will be like a more secure application. So there are multiple use cases, and all those use cases we might use this properties file. Yeah, but right now, like if you see, if your application is more on Spring based or any kind of framework based, we never prefer properties, because right now Spring framework is giving everything to you. But if you are in a Java framework and it's a more old application, then you can, for sure, you can see this property somewhere in the code.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So how can we create these properties? It's like, it's again like you can't create directly. So let's say properties equal to new. I can't go and do this. So if I do this, this is nothing but it's empty. Right now, this is nothing but it's empty. So I'm giving like default. This default is nothing but again a properties. So what I'll do is, instead of giving new object, I can give like system is a lang package. And if you see, there's something called get properties. So right now I haven't added any properties. So I'll just go use the system properties. So if you see, you can list them. What are the properties? You can list them. And I'm going to list them using sysout, because I don't have created any out objects. I'm just using sysout. So if you see right now in the system, like in my system, if you see, these are the properties I have. So one is C program files, Java is the Sun boot path. Java AVM version is having this one. And for file encoding is in the system Sun IO package. So all these properties are getting loaded from my system, which is nothing but the Java package. From the Java package, Java 1.8, what are the versions I have? Java runtime is 1.8. This is again one more property. The line separator is empty. User variant is empty. OS name is Windows 10. So all the properties, whatever I have as part of system, everything can be loaded here. So I can get it and I'm printing it. So I'm just printing it as form of sysout so that you'll be able to see it here. But these are all the system properties. So same way, if you have your own properties defined and you want to access them on your application time, you can create it using new properties, add your properties, and then you can load them on the bootstrap of your application. Okay, so we'll see this once we start writing and creating our own files. Right now, we'll see how to use the byte array output stream. So again now, so you can check your size and you can go and write your data. And if you see this write data method, you can see something overloaded, int with some b. So if you see this one, yeah, it's again overloaded method, either int or it goes with byte array or it goes with byte array and int and int. So what is this off and length? So you would have heard the term offset and the term length. So length is like the total capacity of your file, the byte sizes of your file. What is offset? You have any idea?
Offset I have come across like buffer.
Yeah.
Not sure.
So it is basically like not a complete value, we can say. It's like a predetermined value. Based on that, you progress on your entire writing progress. Okay, this is my, let's say like an intermediate value. I need to do this, and post that I need to carry on. So this would be the way you would be considering this offset. So like this is like an, what to say, an indicator, like whether you have actually reached to an end of your file or you are still in that particular, what to say?
I think screen sharing stop.
Yeah, I just stopped. I'm sharing it again. No, I was getting pings, so I just wanted to stop and close it. Yeah. You're able to see my screen?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay. So now, so this offset is kind of an intermediate value that helps you to understand that whether we are reaching the end of the file or are we like close to it, or are we in the start of the file, something to understand ourselves in the entire programming way when we write a file. For that purpose, we use this offset so that we can avoid few of the runtime exceptions. So if you see here, whether the offset is available or not, we are just throwing this exception, right? We are throwing this exception when the offset value is less than 0 or it is exceeding than the length. So in that cases, we are just making sure that it should, it's throwing an exception or not. So those scenarios can be handled out whenever we are starting to write our program. So now let's go here and to write what is the data you need. You need byte array and you're going to write them. So to do this, do I need to create again a new byte or can I use the same one?
So the output will be writing to system. So going to write to an array.
So this time I'll not create bytes like this. Let me create a string so that you'll know what is the other way to create your bytes. So let me create the string here.
So you're going to write to an array and then you are going to
Yeah.
print
So
it.
what is this? You need bytes. Anyway, you need a bytes to write the data because this write will accept only the byte array, or you have to give the length of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a string, say this is byte array output string. And now I have string. So whenever I'm writing, I'm going to give S. It will not accept directly S because it's a string data type. So I need to get the bytes. So string has something called get bytes method, which can help you to give you the byte array. So I'm going to use that get bytes. So I'm good with it because this is an overloaded method. Either I can give byte or I can officially pass the offset length, offset and the length of the entire file what you're going to write. So right now I'm good with bytes because I don't know the length of this entire byte string. So let's do this. And before that, let me print this byte so you'll know what is getting printed also.